Welcome everyone to the Super Connector again. I'm glad to have you guys here. Today we have a special guest, Gabriel Mora Elizondo. Gabriel has generated over $50 million in revenue for his clients in high ticket sales and currently coaches the elite closers of Latin America in his coaching company called Closers Elite. You can find his links to that in the comment section down below. He's provided consulting for over 60 companies in Latin America and 300 companies worldwide in the last 3 years. Welcome, Gabriel. How are you doing?
Thank you, dude. Thank you so much for having me. Doing totally fine and super excited to be here. Share some of my story with you guys.
Great, great. So, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself to kick this off, just so the audience could get an idea of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, dude. I've been in the Latin American space for about 2.5 years now, but it was until last month or two that I decided to fully, detach from the English speaking market and focus on the Latin American market. And so, uh, it's been a little bit of a move, but we're currently building the first and only elite closers community in Latin America, where it's just not washed down versions of other programs in English, for example, but it's actual sales knowledge from way over 10 years of experience in the fields, battling and closing deals. And yeah, dude, that's really what we're pouring into right now. It's all of these closers that have a lot of potential that's untapped at the moment. Uh, from that background of IT sales for the last 10 years, right around that.
So, what made you decide to kind of move specifically into the Latin American market and focus on that?
Dude, it's funny because I always wanted to, but I had a lot of limiting beliefs around, Latin Americans don't pay that much. There's not that much money, not much acquisition power here. And of course, as a closer in the English speaking market, 10K months are not, weird to see. And then, for example, when at the peak of my closing career, I got to 20, 30K months consistently. And that's hard to repeat here as a closer. So for a lot of time, that was my conundrum for not wanting to get into the market. Uh, if I can tell you a story in less than 5 minutes, funny enough, I met a guy at an event, just like I met you, for example,
Yeah.
and the guy just got obsessed with how I was making 30 grand a month without having a business, and enjoying freedom while doing it. And so that was almost harassment would happen afterwards. The guy just kept asking me to train him and show him what I did and how it got done and all that stuff. And given the fact that I had helped a couple of his friends as well with their businesses, until one day I told him, I like, dude, just give me X amount of dollars and I'll train you. I thought he would say no, but long story short, he sent the money in, and that's really what started it all. Right, that was the first closer that I trained in Latin America. Um, and dude, I mean, the guy's doing like 15 grand a month right now, closing for
Wow.
Latin American companies, right? So turned out pretty well, but that's really what got me into it. I never really had the intention until that one guy kind of opened up my eyes to, oh shit, he actually paid, and let's see if he's good now. And then it was just transferring all of the information and knowledge that I had from my mentors and from my own experience into him, and seeing it play out in this market, dude, helped me realize that the Latin American market is growing and maturing to a point of where it's stable as well, right? It's not the roller coaster it used to be a couple years ago. So yeah, I guess that's really what got me into gear.
So interesting that you said it's not the roller coaster like it was a few years ago. So what has changed and what has made it more profitable to get into that market now?
Dude, it's just I guess adoption of the online space. Of course, we all kind of grew up with the internet being a thing, and funny enough, kids nowadays kind of take it as for granted. But for us, my first phone, I got it when I was like 15 years old, 14 years old, something like that. So we started adopting this thing called the internet, and all the way up until now is that people are realizing it's not all a bunch of scammers and fake gurus and stuff, but there's actual real solid business people in there. And so, for example, in the education space, um, I guess just like with any market, there's going to be a bunch of people selling smoke and not doing the right things, and that of course burns out a lot of people. And some people take advantage of the fact that they are more exposed there, and so then they just copy and paste information, bring it in here, and so then it's good information, but it has no depth to it, and so they end up getting a lot of clients that get into the expertise of someone that doesn't really understands what they're selling. So that adoption process that has been going on for a couple of years kind of got up to a point where enough solid good people came into the market and established themselves and got real actual results for clients. And so I guess that's really what started what's matured to a point where it's a solid industry now, right, where you
Yeah.
get people willing to invest and knowing how to do their due diligence to invest in the right places. And so at least from my point of view, the market is getting to a point where you see more and more offers that you know s- stay and succeed across the test of time, and you see more and more closers that are able to get to 10K months, 15K months consistently without dropping massively or having to switch offers every now and then, just like you see it in the English speaking market as well, where that's a thing for closers is just those offer hoppers that go from offer to offer to
Yeah.
offer because there's a bunch of naysayers. So I guess we've got up to a point where again the market is safe enough, stable enough to sustain growth and sustain high performance for the right people. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And what I'm thinking is that even someone that I spoke with a number of years ago, and he was talking about the instability in at least the Spanish speaking market. And I guess that has changed. But there is a misconception that there's no money to be made in the Spanish speaking market. And it's not true. So, can you just elaborate on that a little bit? Because a lot of people believe that they must speak English in order to even succeed in this industry.
Dude, that's well, a couple of points there because it's a funny thing. I've recently onboarded a couple clients into the program that are actively learning English to get into the English speaking market as closers because they have the idea that it's going to be easier to get to 15, 20 grand a month as a closer there. And for one part, it's true just because of the acquisition capacity people have. Of course, stronger currency, stronger, credit system, all that good stuff. But at the same time, dude, if you're just learning English and you're, decent closer, like you're getting to compete with top dogs there. And so you're gonna have to go ahead and take their place. And I wouldn't dare to say that's easier than conquering this market right now, right? So um, number one is just understanding that or understanding where's the lowest hanging fruit. It's key on that process. But second, it's understanding where the Latin American market is at right now, or the Hispanic market, because then you have Spain and some other countries that do
Yeah.
speak Spanish for a good amount of their population, right? So biggest thing I guess is I think the second largest community in the US, correct me if I'm wrong, is Latin Americans. And
Yeah.
so then you got what, like 60, 70, 80 million people that speak Spanish there that have access to the credit system, that have pretty good acquisition power. So if you speak Spanish and run this kind of offers, there's a whole country of Latin Americans in the United States that, are pretty good market fit for almost any offer. Number one. But then number two is every single country in Latin America will have a part of the population that has decent to great acquisition power, right? Take Costa Rica, for example.
Yeah.
Dude, it's a 5 million people country. It's pretty freaking small. But I got plenty of friends that are running offers doing 50, 60, $100,000 a month as coaches. Um, whose client base is 90% Costa Rican based, right? Uh, Yesterday met up with a friend that teaches financial literacy, and dude, he's doing $1.2 million in sales every single year for the last 5 years, and his clients are 95% Costa Ricans. And so if you can manage to build a business like that with a country as small as Costa Rica, then what's up
Yeah.
with Argentina? What's up with Mexico? What's up with Colombia? Dude, that are
Yeah.
huge countries. I guess huge for me because I live in a pretty small one. Um,
Yeah.
but I have pretty decent populations where, yes, it's not as powerful as the United States, for example, or some countries in Europe, but you still have a pretty decent sized audience that you can sell high ticket to uh, without running out of clients, right? Like it's almost impossible to be fair.
Especially if you're talking about B2B, because businesses do have money to spend. And I think it's great that there's a lot of people that can get into this market now because they're unaware and they may believe that it's filled with scams and they have all these misconceptions, but it's not necessarily true. So long as they find the right people to follow, and that's why I recommend people watching this to definitely go and check out, Gabriel's Instagram and his website and take a look at his coaching program. Now, you told me a little bit. You wrote to me a little bit about yourself, your story, how you started off working on a farm, was it? Or harvest? Can you tell me your story?
Yeah, dude. Good. I'm from Perez de Ledon. That's a small town here in Costa Rica. Uh, Long story short, I grew up in the fields, and so yeah, I used to go and pick coffee at my grandfather's land when I was a kid. Uh, and it was always the thing that we were not the richest. We were never really poor, but we were pretty limited, and just because we could live
Yeah,
off the land pretty easily and got a pretty decent lifestyle, but still, materially speaking, I always wanted stuff that I couldn't have, right? So I kind of grew up throughout my life wanting to understand how to master that game because I had a pretty good life, but when it came to money, there was never any, right? And so that was a huge thing for me. And part of that is my dad, when I was 3 years old, he moved to the United States to work and make money, and then came back with finding out the American dream was not so real anymore, right? And so all of that, childhood trauma, I guess, that bleed into how do I make money. So that was my thing. Long story short, dude. About 10 years ago, I was running a project for a non-profit called Amigos de las Americas in Dominican Republic, and my best friend told me that Ty Lopez was hiring for closers from an Instagram story, right? And
yeah,
so ended up applying, getting the job. So instead of working for that company, I then took 2 weeks vacation and then started working for Ty. And that really was what changed my life. From there on, I understood that I could make money from a laptop, and from there on, I understood that I could earn money in US dollars with total freedom from home, right? So uh, the funny thing is, back in the day, I don't remember closers were a thing. I remember it was just, you know, sales, remote sales, but there was
yeah,
not such a thing as setters and closers. It was more like, here's this list, do whatever it takes to activate it and get sales, right? And so that was all there was. Um, but then one thing led to the other. Funny enough, Ty then grew up a lot, and it became a status symbol to have said that I had worked with Ty, and that I had been trained by all these massive people that were around him. Because that's the thing. Then training with Ty or working under Ty allowed me to learn from pretty solid people that had done hundreds of millions in sales as well. And so it really just led into having access to pretty high level mentors that then open up the doors to almost anywhere that I went into, right? So then from there, I went into working with scaling with systems. Ravi Vovala, if you locate him, I was like the third employee, fourth employee at the company, and then we went from $30,000 a month to $25 million in sales within 3 years. I was one of the founding members of the team, if you will. Uh, and dude, seeing all of that for a guy that grew up again picking coffee in his grandparents' land was impressive, and it was a lot of personal expansion, right? And so, dude, that's really how it all started. That led me to realize that I like marketing, I like business, But if there's one thing I'm passionate about is human nature, is how humans think and make decisions, and why do we behave in the way that we behave, and all of that. Really, if you look into it, that's sales. Like sales is the way that you use that knowledge to make money, right? And so I love it. I really get into that stuff. That's like fun stuff for me to get into, and then I can make money off of it. Dude, that's don't say anything else. Like that's my jam. So that's really how I got into this space, and what brought me here today, right?
Great. And it's interesting that you said, like, that you spoke about human psychology and how much you discover about other people in sales. And what I've noticed too, and from all of my mentors have brought across to me, is you will learn so much about yourself as well once you understand human psychology. So, what are some things that you noticed and you developed within yourself along the way? Because there must have been some shockers along the way.
Dude, I can tell you that one moment that kind of shifted everything. I was in Mastermind in Tenerife in the Canary Islands in Spain with the company with scaling with systems. And dude, there was this like bonfire that we were all hanging around, and dude, next to me was, for example, Christian. He was the media buyer for ClickFunnels at the moment. So big guy in the space. Then we had Ravi. Then we had this other guy that came from Goldman Sachs, and like all these huge people that I used to see on the internet. And one of them said, "Dude, guys, let's tell our stories about our worst job ever." And everyone was talking about pretty cool jobs in Silicon Valley, and like the high life. And when he came to me, I was like, "Dude, I'm harvesting coffee in my grandfather's land." But then that really shocked me and got me into imposter syndrome in terms of what am I doing here? Like, why am I here? Like, I don't belong. Like I'm not that smart. I'm not that special. And so, dude, on my way back to Costa Rica, I remember making that decision. Like I don't fit in anymore in here. I gotta build myself up. I gotta build something of my own because I don't. Like, that's not my community. And dude, I loved everyone in the company, and ended up closing that, just understanding exactly what you said. I need to find myself a little bit more because I've also been trying to fit in into an environment that I love with people that I love and respect, but I don't feel like this is it. And I mean, since I was a kid, I've always had that calling for helping others and teaching and mentoring. And so I always had that idea of being able to teach what I've learned, what changed my life. Because back in the day, at that point when that happened, I was making 10, 15 grand a month, which was pretty freaking good. And it actually puts me in the 1% in, for example, in my country. So, it was pretty crazy situation to be that young, making that amount of money, being surrounded by all that people. But then wanting to find out how to find your purpose, right? And that's when he came to conclusions that I should focus more on what I want, and because I was doing a lot of other admin stuff and running around in the company. And so I decided to focus on sales. And then that's when I started thinking about how do I get to a point where I feel good enough about myself to be able to teach others, right? Like, how do I achieve enough so I can then share it? Because I didn't feel like I had achieved enough at the time, right? And so that's what led me into networking and getting into different opportunities, and leveling up as a person uh, till that day came. Probably a bit too late because it took me about 10 years to get into coaching myself. But uh, that's it. It was just a journey of self discovery and self realization where you realize that, dude, I guess if anything, the biggest lesson is you can become anything you want in a practical sense, not in a cheesy way of you can be anything you want, but if you analyze yourself, there's not anything that you cannot learn. And if you understand that, then it's just about what do I need to learn in order to get to where I want to be. Like, if I want to be a Wall Street investor, all I need to do is learn about it, and all that information is in the internet. So I just need to learn it, right? And so at some point I understood that, and I just started that process of learning the right skills and stacking them up until I felt confident enough to start doing what I do now, right?
So that seemed like a pretty big shift in perspective. Now, how did that shift in perspective affect your bank account?
I did beautifully. That's a great question, dude. Initially, not that much, or actually, yes. Let me explain. funny thing is when you're that young and you start making that much money, because here in Costa Rica, 5 6 years ago, making 10 grand a month as a 20 something year old without a lot of financial education and guidance, that's dangerous, dude. So I got into some pretty stupid decisions and lifestyle. I got to the point where I knew what it was getting, $30,000 a month in checks, and then by the end of the month worrying about the rent. And so, just pretty pretty stupid decisions back then. You know what they say: if you want to be old and wise, you got to be young and stupid. I did a fantastic job on that.
I love
Uh,
that.
and so, dude, if you ask me how did that affect my bank account initially, it's funny because it was like a bucket without a bottom, right? Like it just empty all the time because I started sort of filling up all the gaps that I had emotionally and personally in terms of things that I never had, things that I was never able to do. I remember at one point, for example, I would spend $5,000 $6,000 a month in food every single month. Which then again, depending on where you're at, that's nothing or a lot. But here in Costa Rica, it's definitely way, way, way too much. I got fat. I got out of shape mentally and physically, and so, dude, all of that led me to last couple of years realizing the problem that came and starting working on to work on my own, right, and starting to focus on the right things, because when you get into that jam, there's never enough, right? There's never
Yeah.
enough pleasure, enough food, enough travel, enough luxury you can have until you kind of look at yourself and fix yourself internally, and then you're able to actually start building stuff, right? And so, yeah, as of recently, business has started booming. Part of what I told you over Instagram the other day, uh, dude, I don't know what it is, but in Argentina, I started to get a lot of rhythm, because there's pretty good sales culture there, and right now in Latin America, there's not that many, or if anything at all, there's not really high level sales coaching at all. And
Okay.
so, closers started talking about it, and my track record and the results that people get when they work with me and all that stuff. And so it got to the point where, financially speaking, things started to go north and in pretty good terms. But it also came with working myself internally and emotionally first to be able to build, because otherwise you're just an empty bucket all the time. And it's just realizing that if you don't work that out, you can spend a lifetime like that, right? Like that's where you see the guys that are making millions in numbers, but their bank accounts are always empty. And I used to think that's crazy to see, or that's just too crazy to be through, until at some point I realized I had made way over $1 million, but I had none of that in my bank account. I was like, how did this happen? Like, when did
Yeah.
I get that much money? But again, it's just you lose track of things, right? So yeah, that's it. Again, much better spot now, and I guess that's just part of the journey and part of the lessons you got to learn. And if anything, that's why I always say it's a good thing that it happens when you're on the way up and not on your way down, that you're learning those lessons, right?
Yeah. And I would also say that pretty much anyone in their early 20s that's making that much money is going to make really stupid decisions. You have to
Yeah,
live through that. And it does
yeah.
bring me to one topic, because there was even a study done in the United States where they wanted to find out the measure of happiness according to income. And it turned out that there was a certain level, and I think it was about $80,000 per year, where basically all of your living expenses are taken care of. And above that, happiness was not derived from money. It had to be derived from other areas of your life. And so, in a place like Costa Rica, obviously you didn't need that much to survive. So, it seems like you kind of found out like you needed another reason or another purpose. Like, what happened there in order for you to kind of push through that?
Dude, you want the real answer or the sugar coated answer? uh,
The real answer.
I guess, at some point, I knew I was good in sales, but personally I knew I wasn't living, being coherent with myself, and I wasn't preaching the values that I said I live by. And so, uh, for a while I had all this good image around, or from the people around me, that everyone admired me and respected me, but I knew that wasn't me, right? I knew I wasn't financially smart. I knew I wasn't making the right decisions through there. I knew I wasn't getting in any better health situation, and so that just kept repeating itself until it was painful enough for me to realize I needed to do something about it. And you know, start reading self-help books, and you start going in through this phase of self-help and self-development. Uh, Long story short, dude, I guess what made the shift was a couple of years ago with a guy called Diego Dreyfus, uh, big influencer in the life coaching side and stuff. Like a
Okay.
good modern day philosophist. I heard him talking about mushrooms and magic trips and stuff. And
Yeah.
dude, I remember having a friend that have told me about a shaman that lived nearby. And so right
Yeah.
after I heard him, I felt like that was a thing to do. And so I called up the guy. Long story short, dude, one of the best experiences of my life. I've never felt so much love and plenitude and peace in really in any sense. And the funny thing is, right after that, my mind was just a lot clearer. Right, like, right after that, I kind of felt leaner to be able to go ahead and do the right things, and I kind of felt the courage to go ahead and fix the stuff that I needed to fix. And so that's really what kick-started it. Right, started to make big changes in my life in regards
Yeah.
to the people around me, in regards to my habits, in regards to my business and my skills, and the people that I helped, and all that stuff. And they just kept getting bigger and bigger and better. And I guess that's really what it was. It's just at some point you feel enough pain that you realize you got to do
Yeah.
something about it, and then the right opportunity, the right things kind of present for you, right? It's not that everyone should do shrooms. It's just that at that moment that was kind of the trip that I needed in order to realize, dude, what are you doing with your life? Then
Well, I encounter so many people, and I've experienced it myself. When it comes to sales, a lot of people feel like quitting. They feel a sense of pain as if they are not getting to where they want to be, and they're constantly looking at the people that are the most successful and then comparing themselves to them, even though they've only been in sales for a few months, something absurd like that. However, it seems like a transformation is really necessary for anyone that is going through a journey starting their own business. It's not just about, hey, I'm gonna make a bunch of money and everything's going to be all good. That's just the beginning. And then the transformation from there happens. And it seems to be different for everyone. So I think that's a really cool story that you had. And it seems like when you came back to your values, something you said, like when you came back to your values, that's something that made a change in you as well, right?
yeah, dude. I mean, full transparency. That was talking to my girlfriend about it the other day. uh, when you're a top G in Latin America, in terms of you make a lot of money, a lot more money than any other 20-year-old, uh, it gets pretty easy to, get girls and get cheap, fast attention and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You kind of get pretty distracted with it. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and he asked me a similar question. My answer was that I just realized how much time I was losing thinking about party and alcohol and girls, just
Yeah.
swiping on Bumble and trying to see who would I cope with. Uh, then now I'm at peace. Like I don't need to go out and do stuff. Like love a girl, love the life that I have, live in a pretty comfortable place. It's like you get to a point where you're full, where you don't need to fulfill or to fill any gaps or any emotional holes that you have.
Yeah.
And then that's where you kind of start building up, right? And so I guess values wise, we all have a different set of them, but at the same time, we all have a similar base of what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
And for me, at least, the biggest thing is, dude, I love training and helping and educating people. Like that's where I feel, the most blissful of anything. And so, of course, I want to make money. Of course, I want to build a business around it. But at the same time, seeing a student, for example, that used to pick up trash when he was a kid in Argentina and now makes 20 grand a month, bro, that almost want to make wants me make me cry. Because it's knowing that you've changed your life, right? And of course, made some money in the process. But dude, that's nowhere near the satisfaction of knowing that that person's life has completely changed, and that the skills that changed my life in the beginning now can change his life too, right? um, Yeah, like for example, the other day I got a call from a client, Mariano, the Argentinian guy, is in the late 40s, early 40s actually. Almost crying because he made his first 10K a month, and for the rest of his, or for all of the previous part of his life, most he's ever made was like 2.5 grand. And so, dude, just achieving that at that stage of life and knowing that it's possible and knowing that he can now control his financial situation and the things that he wanted to do as dreams, dude, that's a fulfilling part. That's where, again, you don't need anything else. You don't need to buy any other fancy expensive stuff. Like that's really
So
what you're after.
it seems, I mean, first of all, from the story that you told me, I wouldn't have thought that that would have happened because when I look at you, you seem like a very healthy person and you're very well
Mm.
put together. Obviously, you've worked on yourself. It seems like that has been a part of the process of moving from just someone that's making money into a leader because being a leader is not easy. It's very difficult, despite what a lot of people may think. It's not just giving orders to people. But in your transition from becoming just a salesman to a leader that's actually changing people's lives, what was that like along that way? What difficulties did you face?
Dude, that's a funny thing that I think, or not funny, for fucking lacking words in English now. Uh, but it's a pretty interesting part of the process because I used to be into leadership since I was a kid. I took some leadership courses from a leadership doctor in Israel that used to came down to Costa Rica and teach us nothing religious, not none of that. But I used to work with some um, non-profits that used to bring that sort of people to teach us stuff, right? And the topic that I always really got hooked on was, again, leadership, how humans behave the way they behave, and the reasons behind them. And so, ended up being the general manager for that organization a couple years later, and then managing a net of over 1,500 youth in Costa Rica, and then that transitioned into managing, hundreds of people at a time in different countries, in Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, in the U.S., here in Costa Rica for a couple of years. And so leadership was sort of that calling since the beginning, right? And for example, at some point we were working with youth in social risk, and dude, I was 19 years old, and I was mediating a conversation between a guy that had been, again, young guy that had been convicted for violent crimes, and a guy that hooked up with his wife, and they were part of the same team, and they just realized right there. So this guy wanted to kill this guy, and this guy was an idiot who was kind of, provoking the other guy, and I had to deal with that, right? And I had to mediate that conversation and sort of understand both and get them to be friends. So not only get them to not kill each other, but get them to work together for the rest of the time. And back then I didn't really understand what I was developing, but I was developing the skills that now help me help others, and be able to stay calm through those fires when people start getting warmed up and stuff. And little did I know that that would make sales look easy later on, because again those situations were pretty intense, right? But that was it. That's really what got me into leading people early on. And dude, again, if I tell you, I've never been more fired up in my life than the time that I knew I had 150 youth coming from different parts of my country to spend a full 2 week period of time in a national park building universal trails for the national park, right? That was fucking exciting. I was fucking pumped all day long. I had limitless energy, and really came down to seeing people grow and network and stuff, which is what we do now, but in sales, but with skills that change people's lives to a more practical level, right?
It's amazing how just a simple skill set, well, not simple, but learning that skill set can change a person's life. And a lot of people, I think the most common thing we go to when we're inexperienced in our mind is we need resources in order to make more resources. But in fact, a skill set that you have is the greatest resource because you develop it more and more along the way. And then the resources that you're going to make out of that when you're hitting 20K months, I mean, that's incredible. And it just comes from speaking and learning human psychology. Now, You had mentioned something about sales mentors and sales coaches. So, who were some of your sales mentors that really helped you along the way in the beginning of your sales journey?
Yeah. That's a funny thing because I haven't really had a lot of mentors, as in myself getting into coaching programs. But for example, when I started learning from Ty back in the day, that was my first mentor. And it was not his programs, but it was actually him teaching me, right? And love him or hate him, the guy knows what he's doing to a certain degree, right? The guy has been able to attract enough attention from the world and to sell enough stuff to be pretty well off. And so that was a pretty good first mentor. From there, he would bring on people like not Cole Gordon, Grant Cardone, Cole Hatter, some other pretty high level people back in the day that would come down and give us one-on-one training for the team. And so that was my constant, right? I just got used to seeing all these guys that Cole, for example, back then, Cole Hatter had done way over $100 million in real estate sales, for example. That those numbers blew up my mind, and it was so impressive that I guess that's really what opened me up to learning and absorbing as much as I could. I guess one that I should mention, John Whelan. I love that guy to death. When I was back in high school, he was the first person that kind of taught me, and that's a guy that had made some money in the dot com boom, retired in Costa Rica. I did a practice from my high school in his office, and he was the first person that kind of opened up my eyes to gave this is what's possible, right? Took me under his wing and started guiding me towards what sort of skills I should learn. And I remember it was in his office the first time that I saw him come in celebrating a real estate sale he made. He made like 34 grand in commission. I was like, dude, wait, what's like? Today you've made $34,000. Like that's one sale. And I remember thinking, okay, sales is the thing. Like that's where I need to go, right? And so that was my first ever business mentor. Not that practical, but very transformational in life in general. John then Ty, and he opened up the doors to lots of other different mentors in the time that I worked with them. Then again started working with Ravi, and dude, I would have paid $1,000 to learn from Ravi, but instead I got paid to work for him, right? And
Yeah.
so I guess that allowed me to be under his wing. Dude, I remember times where, for example, when the pandemic started, I was working with Ravi, and at the very beginning of the pandemic, I moved to the beach. Literally, just rented a suite in a hotel for 6 months and went to live there. I remember, drinking beers with my friends on a Sunday night, 11 p.m. I would get a message from him, dude, what are you doing? I'll be like, nothing. And so then he would ask me to connect on Zoom, dude. And 11 p.m. at night, we would just connect and develop stuff for the business. Um, that dude, again, now I realize that those were the mentors that people nowadays pay hundreds of thousands of dollars to have, but I had
Oh,
them
yeah.
one on one because I was providing value for their companies, right? And so I guess that's it. But in the more recent mentors, if anything, the most impactful mentor in sales, by all means, Bill Walsh. Uh, Dude, guys, Don, funny enough, now I'm in a connecting point in my life where going to one of his masterminds in London was the first time that I had ever invested into my education on the trip, like going
Yeah.
overseas, right? And dude, that event really opened up my eyes to what was possible for other closers, and I was able to pay for that trip, not the company, not anyone, but just me wanting to grow. And now November 21st, 22nd, where I'm hosting the first ever mastermind from my company in Argentina, and I'm doing it in a pretty similar style as Bill did that one. Uh, and so, dude, again, it's just fucking thrilling to think that now I'm being able to facilitate the spaces that once changed my life there. But if you ask me about mentors, those are some of the names that I can mention that really changed my life. And actually, another one other guy, Adam Paul Taylor, probably know who I'm talking
Oh,
about, right? But
yeah.
then he was my sales manager for a little bit, and Adam was Bill's right hand man at some point. And so, it just was connecting dots from people that I knew and that I could see perform because he was a closer first and then moved up to managing the team. Um, and dude, that's really it. Those were sort of the people that kind of guided me the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I interviewed Adam twice on this podcast, actually. I've only interviewed a few people twice, but I can tell that I'm definitely going to have you on again sometime because as you increase your company, especially after your mastermind, you're going to be so pumped up. Now, can you just say again, when is that mastermind?
November 21st and 22nd.
November 21st and 22nd. So that's about 3 weeks away from now. Now, do you
Yeah.
have them every few months or something like that?
No, dude, it's no. This is the first one, and it started as a joke. The thing is, I started getting a lot of Argentinian clients, and so they kept asking me when would I visit them. And so I just told them, like, guys, you bring me five more guys, and well, I'll do a mastermind for you. But it was a joke, and 35 people later, dude, like that just got way out of hand, and so
Oh,
uh,
wow.
had to, hold my word, and so that's why it started. But dude, honestly, and now that I can share that, I'm fucking pumped because we opened up tickets to my community first, and then to one of my good friends' community as well. He has around 140 closers in his community. Tickets sold out in 2 days between two communities without even having to offer them to the public. I think there's like five tickets left for the general entrance. So even that is just there's a lot of demand for high ticket, good sales training, and
Yeah.
and we're seeing that response from the market, right? So yeah.
Did you ever think you would be where you are now when you started first in high ticket sales?
Funny thing is, my dad asked me the same thing a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Well, yeah." Like I didn't know how or when, but I knew what I wanted, right? And so, uh, not trying to be cocky, but I did see myself doing big stuff. I just never really thought of how fast would that materialize, but I knew I
Yeah.
wanted to do big stuff, and I guess that's what we're starting to do now. Is really starting to change people's lives through the skills that I've been able to learn, and that's what's happening right now, right? That
Yeah.
event opened up my eyes to, hey, dude, like it started as a joke. Now you got 50, 60 people coming to see you from 4 or 5 different countries. That's bunkers to me. Like I never thought someone would want to pay a flight ticket or plane ticket to go and see me abroad. Like, I don't know why, but they're doing it. So I'm trying to prepare a good show for them. Yeah.
Now, when your dad asked you, did you ever think you would be where you are now when you started? And of course, you just said, well, yeah, absolutely, I know. Now, what do you think that is? Do you think it's like a confidence or that you knew you had the work ethic or ambition? Like, where did that come from?
Dude, one thing that I learned from Gary V back in the day when I was in high school, 29 years old now, so that was long ago. Um, was that one of the best things you can have in life? It's good parents, right? And then if anything, that's what I've got. It's two parents that instilled in me pretty high self esteem, and so even though I was bullied like a bitch in school, I always managed to keep that high self esteem because of my parents, right? And so now that you ask me, where that does that come from? I had two loving parents that made sure that I felt good enough about myself to make something out of my life. And so, if anything, funny enough, when I was listening to Gary, uh, I got into listening to Warren Buffett later on, and one of the things he would say is never doubt yourself. And so I remember just instilling that in my mind as a kid, like, cool, I'm going to be a billionaire someday. How I don't know. Warren says I shouldn't doubt myself, so I'm not going to do it either. And so that's really where it started. It's just something always told me again, and that something is my parents. You can do whatever you want in life, and then once I started listening to the right people, that just starts taking you up and up and up. Because, dude, I'm sort of the black sheep from my family, the crazy guy that quit
Yeah.
school and never had a real high level job and all that stuff. Um, but it's just I've always been that crazy to think that I can do what I want to do, and I never really stopped to doubt myself. I just think how, like I never really thought, okay, I can't do that. It's more a matter of how and how much time is that going to take.
Yeah.
and then you just get into doing it. It's going to take 5 years. All right, let's start now, and 5 years we'll see, right? But it's never an oh no, it's impossible. Like nothing, it's impossible really. Like, if you put your mind to something, you have the capacity to learn it, right? And that's what I tell my clients all the time. Like, with all due respect, unless you have some sort of mental disability and your brain doesn't work properly, dude, like you can do sales. Like you have the mental capacity to do this. And so, again, if you have a proper brain and a, medium functioning body, like, dude, you can do it. You can kick ass. Uh, so I guess that's really what's been on the back of it. I never really, again, stopped to think or to pity myself on the things that I cannot do. I don't think there's anything you cannot do, right?
Yeah. And it's great that you're able to pass that on to your students and to your clients as well, because it makes big changes in their lives. Like you said, that man in his 40s that was crying because he made his first 10K month, and sometimes it's only ourselves that gets in the way of the accomplishments that we want to have. So it seems like you're making a big impact on people with your leadership skills. Gabrielle, I'm really happy that you came on. You're the only person I have brought on here, first person I brought on in the Latin American space. So that's why I think this is such a pivotal moment, even in this podcast, and hopefully for you as well. We're going to have to put like Spanish subtitles on here. I don't speak Spanish. If I did, I would have done this whole thing in Spanish with you. But we're going to have to put some subtitles, make sure they're accurate, do with ChatGPT or something like that. And I want to have you on again sometime in the future. And, I travel around Latin America, so I'll be down in Argentina eventually, and maybe I'll come to one of your mastermind events. Now, everyone that's watching, I want you to check out the links in the comment section down below or in the description, so you can take a look at Gabriel's Instagram, his website, etc., so you can get a hold of him and take his course. Because I'll tell you what, I met Gabriel in person. He's a great guy. On a very deep human level. And I think he's really going to make a big impact on your lives, not just with money, but everything beyond that. So thank you, Gabrielle, for coming onto my podcast. Is there anything that you want to say before we go?
I think we got it, dude. Thank you for having me, and really appreciate the opportunity. If anything, again, we met at a networking event, dude, and I can only say good things about yourself as well. You kind of hooked me into the quality person you were. So, dude, again, super happy to be able to connect, and would definitely love to be back here sharing, some of the progress we make over the next couple months.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Great to have you on, Gabriel. Just wave goodbye to the audience. See you guys later. Come again sometime.
Yeah, dude. Cheers.